Number 10. X-Force. X-Force is known for being one of the most ruthless mutant and X-Men related teams in the comics. It was initially more Cable's team and was used like a sort of time police force to remove threats to the timeline. However, as time went on, the name became repurposed and is now more associated with someone like Wolverine, known for being a sort of mutant black ops team, usually that he leads. Currently, Krakoa is equivalent to America's CIA, and in fact very currently, as of right now in 2022 at the time of this recording, the team is more Hank McCoy, Beast's team, which has recently moved out of the shadows, with Beast deciding to no longer basically hide all the morally questionable, super shady decisions that he's been making to eliminate threats and keep Krakoa safe. Although sometimes it seems like his true aim may actually be something more sinister, because it is an interesting way of trying to keep people safe. And friends, before I move on to my next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love the X-Men, then we have a playlist for you. It's our X-Men playlist. Go check it out and you can watch all the X-Men content that we've done. We've done a lot. Number 9. Brotherhood of Arakko. There have been a couple of X-Men Red teams over the years in Marvel Comics, but for the purpose of this list, we're focused on Storm's Brotherhood that she brought together during her time as ruling regent out on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars before the mutants terraformed it and claimed it for themselves and their people. They appear mainly in the book X-Men Red, which is why I'm referring to them as kind of like X-Men Red, though really the title for this book is a bit of a misnomer when it comes to Storm's team. Well, you could call Storm's Brotherhood this book's main team, and thus X-Men Red because that's the name of the series. It seems initially this was more in reference to the team Abigail Brand tried to put together, but kind of failed to really have takeoff, with Storm's team taking prominence instead. The team initially consisted of Storm, Magneto, the Fisher King, and Sunspot, but now that Magneto is gone, also includes Cora the Burning Heart and Wrongslide. Also includes Cora of the Burning Heart and Wrongslide, a resurrected Rockslide who came back different after he was killed in Otherworld. Number 8. Avengers Unity Division. The Avengers Unity Division is basically a combination of X-Men and Avengers, which makes it pretty OP. At least it was a combination of both these teams when it first started. The team was created by Captain America as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. After the fallout, Cap felt pretty bad about basically not really helping the mutants more in regards to promoting them towards humanity, and making sure that the world over did not really hate and fear mutants. At least, he felt as responsible as he, as one man, could do. But he's a pretty influential guy, so he was like, maybe I should have been helping you guys more. In an effort to do this now, he decided to bring together Avengers and X-Men to work together, creating the Avengers Unity Division. Later on, Inhumans would even be added into the mix as well, so really this team is all about bringing people from different worlds who maybe don't always see eye to eye together, which is a really beautiful sentiment when you think of it. On the initial team, which was known editorially as Uncanny Avengers, we had Captain America leading and joined by Havoc, Thor, Rogue, Scarlet Witch, and Wolverine. Rogue and Scarlet Witch were an especially challenging combination of characters to have on this team, as Rogue vehemently hated Wanda for what she had done to mutants during House of M, and saw her basically as a villain. In fact, most mutants did at that time, so this was in general a powerful team on paper, but one that also came with a lot of issues and a lot of baggage, to be honest. Of course, that's what makes it so interesting to read, right? We're here for the drama. Number 7. Great Ring of Arakko. The Great Ring of Arakko is exclusively made up of Omega level mutants, which really tells you how much of a powerhouse team they would be. They are the ruling body of Arakko, which is the sister mutant island nation to Krakoa. In fact, Arakko and Krakoa are kind of like less siblings and more romantically tied. Ooh, romantic islands that are in love with each other. Both are sentient mutant islands, and for a long time they were actually attached to one another, literally and romantically, and were also in love with each other. Although now, they actually prefer to be separate. They've been separate for a long time and they're like, you know what? The spark, it's gone. Arakko's ruling government has 4 distinct sections, which govern different parts of their civilization, with some areas having more power at given times. For example, in war times, Dawn is the area that typically gets more say, as this is the area that Dawn rules over and governs. The war times. For years, the Iraqi were at war with Amenth, so this would have been a very prominent section for many years in the past in terms of their ruling body. And it's something that the mutants of Arakko struggle with releasing themselves from, the obligation to always be on guard and kinda always be at war with people. While Uranos recently cleaned the clock of the Great Ring of Arakko, that should not undermine their strength, as Uranos is basically on a whole other level by himself as one of the most powerful, ruthless, and I would say evil Eternals that we've ever seen. And I know people would probably put the X-Men above the Eternals or mutants above Eternals, but let me tell you, the Eternals are still pretty powerful, so we gotta respect. Number 6. Versus Inhumans Unity Team. Inhumans versus X-Men was an interesting time, to say the least. We basically had to come up with a reason for these two groups to fight one another, which we did by making the mutants deathly allergic to Terrigen mists, which had actually been released around the world, which ended up killing, a lot of mutants. As a result, Emma Frost made a martyr out of Cyclops, using him to propel forward her own plot to eliminate the threat of the Inhumans. She ended up being one of the main leaders of this team, which was sort of a unity squad, bringing together all mutant-related X teams, primarily Magneto's X-Men, an X-Men team with past versions of the characters, and a more current X-Men team, in addition to some other mutants who have served on X-Men teams before. Number 5. Sword Bearers of Arakko. I mean, when you consider the Sword Bearers of Arakko, we're all pretty much kicking the champions of Krakoa's butts, kinda have to put them high up on this list, right? Well, the Araki are newer when it comes to the mutant status quo, and what we consider to be, an X team, considering we kinda just met them, and they are loosely tied to the X-Men through both their connection to Apocalypse and, being mutants. At the end of the day, they are still mutants, and for that reason, I think we can include them on this list, because this list for me is really more about mutant teams. That's what it's really about, more than, specifically X-Men sister teams or X-Men rosters, which we could do, but I don't know. I feel like to me that's a different list. We just use the name X-Men here because it makes more sense in relation to Marvel mutants and is more appealing than if, we just put Marvel mutants in the title of this video. You dig me? The Sword Bearers of Arakko didn't just best their Krakoan competitors in contests of combat and wit, but also in some of the more charismatic and just straight up strange contests. Also beating them in a dancing competition, a runway model one or a fashion show contest, and a scavenger hunt, to name a few of those seen in X-Force issue number 14 of that 2019 series during the 10 of Swords event. Oh man, I love 10 of Swords. Number 4. The Five. The Five have to be one of my favorite teams to this day. They also in essence stand to represent this current era of X-Men, which seems to sadly finally be coming to a close. Oh no, I'm going to be so sad to see it end. I'm not ready to say goodbye. I'm gonna need a box of tissues whenever if we do a video about that. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be crying the whole time. The Five are iconic in this way because they represent the power mutant kind now holds, the power over life and death. Mutants can resurrect other mutants, and not just that, they can resurrect other people as well, as it turns out, non-mutant people. So they don't just decide who lives and dies in regards to other mutants, but can also pass this judgment on to all the people of Earth. The Five are the team that allows this to happen. They're led by Hope Summers, and the roster includes Egg, Proteus, Tempest, and Elixir. Together, these 5 teammates can resurrect mutants by creating eggs and imbuing those eggs with life, growing clones of mutants who have died, and using their powers to not just recreate them physically, but also to recreate them on a genetic level, giving them back their powers and even modifying them to be as they were in real life. For example, Wolverine having his adamantium-coated skeleton, which is not part of his powers, but something he got later in life, they can do that and also give him those sweet adamantium claws. In addition, the Five also use backups Professor X keeps on Cerebro for all mutants to restore their memories as well, so that they are in essence the same person who died recently. Although the question of what this means for their soul is still something that I think we're considering, and I wonder if that will have repercussions after we end this era. Who hasn't died? That's gonna be the real question. Who hasn't died yet? We should do a list on that. Number 3. Extinction. The Extinction team truly is a scary one. They were around at a time when the Phoenix Force was believed to be returning to Earth. It was thought that the Phoenix Force wanted to merge with mutant messiah Hope Summers and have her act as its host. While the X-Men were more optimistic about the Phoenix's return, the Avengers were not so optimistic. As a result, the mutants deployed their own team to fight against the Avengers, but which was initially also created to defend the mutant island of Utopia and, honestly, the world against extinction level threats. Hence the name, the Extinction Team, you know what I mean? The Extinction team included Cyclops, Magneto, Namor, Storm, Dagger, Magic, Hope Summers, Emma Frost, and Colossus. Talk about a powerhouse lineup. Never mind the Phoenix Force, this team in and of itself seems frightening enough to justify the Avengers' concern, assuming they don't trust the mutants having power, which, while at times both teams have been allied, has always seemed to remain a bit of a touchy subject to the Avengers, who have a history of not playing well with other major superhero teams in the Marvel Universe, to be honest. In fact, they also even have a history of not playing well with each other within their own team. So yeah, me just throwing shade at the Avengers. Number 2, the Phoenix 5. 5 seems to be a magic number when it comes to the mutants. While the 5, as they are simply known, are all about life and resurrection, the Phoenix 5 have the potential to just straight up destroy worlds. Or I suppose they could also save them, if they can avoid being corrupted by the Phoenix's power, that is. The Phoenix 5 are what some members of the Extinction team become after the Phoenix Force arrives on Earth. During a fight with the Avengers, the Phoenix Force is split into 5 pieces, when Iron Man attempts to destroy it. These pieces end up merging with 5 hosts, creating the team we know as the Phoenix 5. Of the Extinction team, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magic, and Colossus are the ones who end up as the Phoenix's hosts, dividing the team. While initially the members of the Phoenix 5 attempt to use their newfound power for good, they all end up kinda getting corrupted, with other members also stealing their power until it is all combined into one host, ending with Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. We all know how that went. Professor X ended up as a dead guy. Number 1, X-Men. Obviously, one of the best and most powerful around has to be the X-Men. I mean, come on. Of course I'm gonna pick the X-Men. I mean, is it too obvious? I don't know, but it's true. And I would say we've actually had one of the best X-Men rosters in recent years, with the previous roster that included Jean Grey, Cyclops, Synch, Lara Kinney's Wolverine, Rogue, Polaris, and Sunfire. While the team has had many different rosters throughout the years that have been standout, Jerry Dugan's team was pretty stacked, especially when you consider you have 2 people that can use other people's powers, one of whom can sync with anyone else on the team. And the current team as well is also fairly stacked, especially with Bobby returning to the main X-Men team and him being a pretty unstoppable force as an Omega level mutant. I mean, honestly, I think Iceman, if he was just a team, he could be a one-man team. That's how powerful he is. If we also considered amassing all the X-Men that had ever served to make one giant super team, then the X-Men would also definitely be the most powerful, as they've had so many members rotate on and off the team throughout the years. Even the team from the classic era, still being younger too, at the time that is, they're not as young now, were pretty powerful. And then of course there were the 80s and the 90s for X-Men, which also saw a lot of really powerful lineups, to be honest, with Kitty Pryde, Logan's Wolverine, Rogue, Havoc, Polaris, and even powerhouses like Magneto and Rachel Summers joining the team. Rachel Summers herself could also be a one-woman team. Number 10, Beast. Oh boy, Beast has been getting dunked on lately, and it has honestly been brutal to read. He might not be a powerhouse in terms of brute strength, but Beast is no slouch in a fight, thanks to his heightened dexterity, years of training, and his ability to pack a punch when needed. But really, his strengths as an X-Men member and former Avenger lie in the area of intellect, specifically in the field of science. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when I talk about X-Men, I love when I talk about X-Men, please support that by clicking like on this video. Seriously, it feeds the algorithm, it helps us, then I can talk more about X-Men. Number 9, Rogue. Rogue is one of those characters who I feel like is constantly shafted from the spotlight because of just how powerful she is, and now she's even more powerful since she reconciled with the trauma that was effectively holding back her powers. So while I was saddened to hear of this, it didn't surprise me when she ended up in a coma almost immediately after being drafted to the X-Men adjacent UK fantasy team Excalibur. Jonathan Hickman had specifically planned to do a Rogue-focused story and series that probably would have tied into the Krakoan-based second ever Inferno event. But alas, he left the X desk before this plan could come to fruition, meaning it kinda got abandoned. Sure, Rogue was on the X-Men, which was very nice to see, but at the same time, she's very much an ensemble member on that team, and she also left shortly after joining, honestly. So we still have yet to get that epic Rogue spotlight period that I was hoping for in the Krakoan era. Number 8, Multiple Man. Multiple Man is just such a great character when it comes to the comics. He deserves so much more, honestly. Well, he's appeared here and there, and he was a main character in the all too short-lived X-Corp series. We really haven't seen too much of him in this era. Granted, everything I have read involving him from the Krakoan era has been great. But of course, this just leaves me wanting more of him. His appearances in this era have often left me asking the question of when are we getting another Jamie Madrox solo series, and why haven't we gotten volume 2 yet? He needs an ongoing solo series, guys. I'm just saying. I would read it, I'll buy it. Marvel, if you're watching, you got at least one buyer right here. I'm sure there's other people too. Multiple Man fans, let me know that you exist in the comments. Number 7, Psylocke. What has Psylocke even been up to lately? After years of being attached to Betsy Braddock, Quanon, who took the name Psylocke, has only recently been getting attention in the comics. This is because, well, for a while, she was too complicated and weird to talk about, to be honest. Betsy, you see, was put in Quanon's body, making her a Caucasian British lady appear Asian, which I think you can understand is weird and, to many, myself included, was considered to be culturally insensitive. That being said, both Quanon and Betsy are fantastic characters that don't deserve to be shelved just because of their awkward past connection to one another. Just because we made that choice for them, it doesn't mean that they deserve to just be forgotten. I want more for both of them. For Betsy, we've seen some of this in regards to her being declared as the new Captain Britain, but for Quanon, who decided to keep the codename Psylocke, her growth feels like it's kind of still ongoing and it kind of got a little stagnant. I loved her development in Hellions and I'm still hoping to see more of this, so hopefully we get more Psylocke action. Number 6, Strong Guy. Strong Guy just hasn't been around much lately for me, and that's a crying shame. He literally is one of the strongest X-Men, I mean it's in the name, and yet I haven't really seen him much lately in the X-books, save for a few appearances I read in X-Men Unlimited, the Infinity comic version of that series, launched back in 2021. In that story that I saw him in there, Strong Man goes on an adventure with his pal Multiple Man. It's good, but it's not really enough to satisfy me when it comes to Strong Man's presence in this current era, which has just been underwhelming. Number 5, Cannonball. Cannonball has been seemingly busy of late, focusing on his family life, but because of that, it's felt somewhat like he's been snubbed in the comics. For the last 4 years, the entirety of the Krakoan era thus far, he's not been doing very much. He did help out with the New Mutants as one of the original founding members, obviously. Almost made it onto the X-Men, being a candidate in the 2021 elections, but ultimately failed to be voted in and instead ended up joining the one-shot team Sunspot's Secret X-Men, which was a fun story, but hey, it's only a one-shot, you know? And then when he finally does get a moment of glory, voted onto the 2023 X-Men roster at the 2023 Hellfire Gala, he's immediately killed off. Rude. Hopefully we'll see some redemption for Cannonball following the fall of X, but honestly, it's sad that he didn't get his moment in the spotlight really during one of the greatest X-Men eras I've yet to read. It's a little disappointing. Number 4, Dazzler. Alison Blair has to be one of my favorite X-Men of all time, which is why I was, of course, surprised when I discovered that after her solo series, she never really did too much, nor caught on in terms of popularity. Allison has always kind of been on the outside of heroics for the most part, as in her series and often in her life, she's more focused on working on becoming a superstar and using her mutant talents to skyrocket herself and her band to stardom as a professional musician and singer. However, this is also why I was so surprised after reading her solo series and getting used to that depiction of her to see how different she had become in Inferno. By that time, Dazzler had turned into a short-haired rocker who was also a reluctant member of the X-Men. Allison has always been a reluctant hero, but when it comes to heroics that she gets tossed into, she also always rises to the task, and some folks don't seem to nail this characterization when it comes to her depiction, which ultimately leaves fans like me kind of disappointed. Like, I want to see Allison working on her career, but I want to see her pulled into stuff, and then she basically has to rise to the challenge. You know what I mean? That's my favorite Dazzler. Number 3, Archangel. Archangel might not be one of the first people that comes to your mind when you think strongest X-Men, but I would argue that he is one of the strongest when it comes to the areas of experience and business. And if we're considering Warren Worthington III in his Archangel form, which he has been like in and out of consistently throughout the Krakoan era, though masking it all the while as best he can, Angel never gets enough love. And X-Corp was far too short of a series for me. So yeah, I want more X-Corp and I want just more Angel. He never gets enough love. Number 2, Rockslide. Rockslide, or rather Wrongslide, as he's known now, although technically that's a different character, feels like he was built up just to be taken away from us. We never saw too much development for him in this era until he was about to be shafted and taken away. Actually, there wasn't even development. It was like he showed up and then gone. He was one of the first to fall victim to the surprising effects of dying in Otherworld, which we'd later learn severely messed with the mutants' resurrection protocols of the Krakoan era. Ultimately, this resulted in him being seemingly destroyed permanently permanently in such a way that it was believed he could never be resurrected again. However, the mutants refused to give up on those who had fallen during the Otherworld tournament and the events leading up to it, and managed to find a way to resurrect their fallen. But unfortunately, dying in Otherworld had left them forever changed when they returned. And many of the characters that were changed as a result kind of faded into the background thanks to them being so different. Rockslide being one of them, who now is Wrongslide, which, like I said, isn't even technically Rockslide, so yeah. Number 1. Gorgon. Gorgon was never really a member of the main X-Men team, long being considered more of an X-Men villain and assassin who was often in the employ of the Yakuza or Hydra, I believe. He is often considered one of the most deadly mutant assassins in the comics, with his mutant power allowing him to turn people to stone if they dare look him in the eye. However, while he wasn't part of the main good guy X-Men team, he has been a member of the Dark X-Men, and I'm gonna count that because it's my list. During the Krakoan era, he also turned over a new leaf, choosing to join the Mutant Nation and become an ally to all of mutant kind, working as part of the Quiet Council's security detail. Unfortunately, his deadly powers and skills were not enough to keep him safe during the Otherworld tournament. And, like Wrongslide, Gorgon was forever changed by his death in the Otherworld tournament, with him coming back with basically the mind of a child. In this new form, he played a role in Way of X, that series, but it also seems that the Gorgon so many of us loved may actually be forever lost, because he's once again been permanently changed by that resurrection. Number 10. Darwin. Darwin is one of the newest characters on this list, first appearing as retconned X-Men member in 2005's X-Men Deadly Genesis. He is Armando Munoz, who was sent to the island of Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men team alongside Vulcan, who was on our part 1 for this list, fun fact. Following the ultimate failure of that mission, Darwin was launched into space alongside Vulcan, and during M-Day ended up absorbing the energy expelled from mutants when they all lost their powers, boosting his own adaptive, evolutionary-based mutant powers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please go check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Who knows, maybe at some point I'll be on that channel for a second. You'll have to go subscribe to find out. Number 9. Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Kalark, former Magister of the Shi'ar Empire. In fact, during his time with the X-Men, his father was the Magister, the ruler of the entire Shi'ar Empire. Like his father before him, he is extremely powerful, and confidence and belief in himself has also been tied to his power levels, boosting him when he is at his most confident. Number 8. Rogue. Rogue is one of my all-time favorite X-Men, being one of the members I most gravitated towards as a kid when watching the 90s X-Men animated series. Well, Rogue and Jubilee, I would say, are my top faves from that series. Her powers are super cool, and over the years, as she's come into her own and learned more about herself, have also only become cooler over time. Rogue can, in essence, absorb the power and life force energy of those she touches, as well as their memories. Unfortunately for Rogue, this meant that for most of her life, she felt very alone, unable to touch anyone since basically puberty without fear of, hurting them, leaving them comatose, or worst of all, killing them. However, in recent years, Rogue has learned how to better master and control her powers, able to harness the powers of her fellow mutants without harming them, as we saw her do with a kiss on Jean's cheek during the current X-Men series during a cosmic casino heist. And she can also touch people without harming them at all, as we've seen with her and her husband, Gambit. Number 7. Genesis, or Evan Sabanur. Usually when we think of X-Men, we do not think of Apocalypse. Well, we maybe think of Apocalypse, but only in regards to him being one of the main villains of the team, not one of their most powerful and intimidating members and assets. However, Apocalypse isn't the only Apocalypse out there. Evan Sabanur is actually the clone of Apocalypse, who would take for himself the name of Genesis. And in fact, we later learn he isn't even the only Genesis either, with Apocalypse's wife also being known by that name, it turns out. Also, there's like another Genesis. There's a few Genesis. Genesis might not be as powerful yet as someone like Apocalypse, but it's possible that he actually has the potential to be even stronger than the original as time goes on. He also happens to be a bona fide hero, for the most part, minus when he had his alignment swapped in Axis. But other than that, he pretty much sticks to heroics and even ends up joining the X-Men. Number 6. Multiple Man. Multiple Man is such an amazingly powerful character. He is Jamie Madrox, and his mutant power is that he can create duplicates, nicknamed dupes, of himself to an almost unlimited limited extent. Initially in the comics, he tapped out at creating 40 dupes at a time, but now we've seen him create a whole laboratory staffing of dupes and more. His duplicates can go out in the world and live, and when he absorbs them back, ideally before they die, he absorbs everything they have known and learned, all their memories, experiences, skills, and knowledge. Of course, he does have to do that before they die. But because of this, Jamie is extremely skilled and is also a PhD multiple times over at this point. He's also done like an insane amount of jobs. He's like Barbie. He's done all the jobs that have ever existed pretty much at this point. Number 5, Vulcan. This is going to be a list that is just filled with Omega level mutants, isn't it? And Vulcan, of course, is no exception. While the youngest of Summers brothers, he is also often thought of as being the most powerful of them all as well. Vulcan is Gabriel Summers, the little brother that for most of their lives neither Scott nor Alex really knew existed. Vulcan joined the X-Men back when Professor X was putting together a rescue team to go into the, at the time, villainous mutant island of Krakoa and save his original X-Men team. Vulcan was part of the team that first attempted this, taking the name originally of Kid Vulcan for himself during his time training with Moira McTaggart's mutant team. While Vulcan's mission with this newly formed X-Men group wouldn't exactly go to plan, he would still remain a former X-Men member who years later would return to get revenge on the X-Men team he had attempted to save, who he blamed for launching him and fellow X-mate Darwin into outer space. Number 4, Sync. Sync is definitely having a big glow up moment right now in the comics, especially in regards to his power levels. And also, he literally glows. He glows rainbows. It's pretty cute. But also, in regards to some valuable character development, he's also seeing a huge glow up as well. Sync is Everett Thomas, a relatively newer character that was created back in 1994, making his first appearance in the 90s X-Men comic series in issue number 36. He tragically died during his time at Emma Frost's mutant school program at the Massachusetts Academy, sacrificing himself in order to help save other students during an attack on the school. However, Sync was recently brought back, resurrected, to be part of a team to venture into the vault to learn more about the Children of Tomorrow, joined by mutants Laura Kinney, aka Wolverine, and Armando Munoz, aka Darwin. He recently joined the main X-Men team as well, and after his time in the vault, being the only one to escape with his knowledge of what happened within intact, he also seems to have leveled up his powers, being able to remain synced with other mutants even when not in their vicinity. So if you've heard other people talking him up lately, that's why. And you should probably read along and join them in that hype train. Toot toot. Number 3, Spider-Man. Did you know that Spider-Man was an X-Man? Yeah, he was. Even though he's not really a mutant, but a mutate. But hey, don't let that limit you. You can still be an X-Men even if you're not a mutant. There's still hope for me. Kinda makes me feel bad for Deadpool though, who always wants to join in on the mutant fun and games and camaraderie, but is so often shafted by them because, well, he's Wade and he's kinda annoying. But of course, us readers all love him anyway. In fact, I think I love him more because he's annoying, but I digress. This is Peter's point, not Wade's point. Spider-Man ended up joining the X-Men in the wake of Wolverine's death, as Storm had found papers regarding to an idea to have Spider-Man join the team and teach his own special class of mutants. As such, he joins the X-Men in Spider-Man and the X-Men issue number 1. Number 2, Iceman. Bobby Drake is deserving of so much respect and praise when it comes to X-Men, and he's come a long way in terms of his character and power evolution throughout the years as a team member. Robert Drake is actually one of the original X-Men team members, becoming notorious for being the kid of the team, the youngest member on that original roster, who is also prone to pull pranks and get into all kinds of antics. In terms of his power set, Bobby has gone from being kind of a snowman in little black booties who loved eating ice cream and throwing snowballs and making ice walls, to an elemental mutant who can control not just snow, but ice and water. He can make ice golems which appear to even be somewhat sentient and living beings. He can shapeshift to become massive, travel in and through water as water himself, and has even been shown to be powerful enough, Omega level mutant that he is, to freeze hell over. Or at least, you know, a version of hell. Number 1, Ascani / Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers is definitely one of the most powerful mutants and X-Men members out there. Of course, she might not be the most powerful. After all, I did create a list of powerful X-Men members prior to this, so if you're thirsting for more powerful members of the X-Men after this video, you should definitely check out our part 1 as well to find out who took my real tippity top spot. But still, Rachel is deserving of a top spot for sure. She is the alternate reality daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey, who are known to make powerful children together across the multiverse. Hence also why Sinister is so obsessed with the two of them getting together. Rachel is one of the chosen hosts of the Phoenix Force, and even without the Phoenix is extremely powerful, being an immensely powerful telepath, telekinetic, and chronokinetic. She can read time, skip through it, travel to alternate timelines and dimensions, and even manipulate time. She also happens to be immune to timeline alterations as well, and is unique in that she is the only version of herself throughout the multiverse. Even another Rachel Summers, should she meet one, would not be an alternate of her. She has no other versions of herself, which makes her uniquely well suited to time travel. Because, you know, then she's not gonna mess stuff up. Number 10. Cable. Cable might be suffering from the techno-organic virus, but even then he is so powerful that he can manage to actually stave it off and slow it down dramatically, continuing to live on as he travels through time without, succumbing fully to the techno-organic virus. Oh yeah, did I mention he can also travel through time and teleport, and that he's an immensely powerful telekinetic and telepath? Because he is all of that and more. Cable is also a master strategist and fighter, having years of experience throughout time doing battle. Cable joined the X-Men back in the 1999 Astonishing X-Men series, and aside from that has also been a major player when it comes to other important X-Men teams such as Exterminators and X-Force. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please go and check out our newest channel and give it a sub, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 9. Magneto. Usually when people think of X-Men team members, they don't really think of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants leader and one of the most iconic X-Men villains ever, Magneto. But the reality is, Magneto isn't all bad all the time. And over the years, we've actually seen him redeemed quite a bit, becoming more than just a powerhouse of a villain, becoming also a powerhouse of an anti-hero, and in some cases, just a full-fledged hero. Magneto first joined up with the X-Men in the second Secret Wars crossover event, Secret Wars 2 from 1985, which followed the original Secret Wars event from 1984 and told the story of what happened afterwards when the Beyonder, instead of kidnapping superpowered individuals, decided to visit them on their home planet of Earth. Number 8. Kid Omega. I don't think many will debate Kid Omega being on this list. He might be gone for now in the comics, with his trope initially also being to constantly be killed during the early days of the current modern X-Men books, but don't let that fool you. Quentin Quire is still a psionic badass who deserves your respect. He is considered to be one of a limited few mutants who belong to the Omega level class, meaning that he has unlimited potential in terms of what he can accomplish. And while being super powerful psionically, he's also super brilliant as well, and can actually think faster and at a higher capacity than even other extremely powerful and skilled Omega level telepaths. Quentin joined up with Logan's X-Men and was shown to be a potential future Phoenix in Wolverine and the X-Men issue number 42. Number 7. Dupe. Dupe is one of the X-Men who is known for being pretty ridiculous, and as such a lot of people don't take Dupe seriously, which also extended to Dupe's power levels. However, I would argue that Dupe is actually one of the most powerful X-Men ever, who is simply grossly underrated due to his nonsensical appearance and his nonsensical depiction in the comics. Dupe has powers that allow him to influence the emotions of others, perform magic, resurrect, travel in the liminal space between comic book panels, shatter the fourth wall as he pleases, and so much more. Aside from strange abilities like being able to access an infinite storage dimension through his own body, he also is just extremely tough and physically strong as well. Dupe is also one of those characters who, when he needs to get things done, he kinda just can. There's a level of irrefutable plot armor with Dupe in a weird way. Number 6. Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force is a weird one to think of as a member of the X-Men. More a cosmic entity than a physical flesh and blood person, the Phoenix Force does have a weirdly strong connection to the superhero community, initially being intrinsically tied to mutants and the X-Men, especially X-Men member Jean Grey. When you think about it, during the time when Jean is often known for being the Phoenix in the comics, this wasn't even really Jean on the team, but the Phoenix Force in Jean's place. While Jean was resting below in Jamaica Bay, Phoenix adopted her form and persona, joining the X-Men team in her place before turning into a villain of the team, becoming becoming the Dark Phoenix, and seemingly, but of course not truly, perishing. If you consider this, Phoenix actually joined the X-Men team under the guise of Jean back in issue 101 of X-Men. Number 5. Juggernaut. Juggernaut is a non-mutant and former X-Men villain, at least currently in the comics, but that hasn't stopped him from joining the team. Juggernaut is also amazingly strong, being imbued with the power from the Gem of Cyttorak, which he acts as an avatar and servant for, serving Cyttorak's will. Cyttorak, however, no longer holds any power over Juggernaut. Recently, Juggy basically left Cyttorak's service to strike out on his own, but still was able to keep his power through remnants of Cyttorak's presence. Using materials Cyttorak left on Earth, Juggernaut was able to construct a new armor for himself and harness Cyttorak's power through this, without being beholden to the demon god and his whims. Number 4. Storm. Definitely someone who deserves your acknowledgement and respect, both as an X-Man and as a ruler, goddess, queen, and regent of planet Arakko. Storm is actually one of the few people who survived the decimation of planet Arakko's populace, which happened recently. She was at the Quiet Council at the time, of course, of Uranus' attack, but I don't think this was a writing ploy to avoid her being killed, because, you know, some people are probably like, well, if she was there, she'd have to die and that would be really bad. If anything, I actually think this was actually a writing ploy to avoid Uranus getting maimed and possibly killed by Storm, because that's how confident I am in Storm's abilities and power. Storm is a master of all the elements and initially joined the X-Men in Giant Size X-Men issue number 1 in 1975. She wouldn't just be a valuable member to the team though, but would also go on to be a strong leader, taking over for Cyclops as team leader in the comics as early as 1980 in Uncanny X-Men issue number 139. After his mourning of the loss of his love and teammate Jean Grey. Number 3. Jean Grey. You know, this list is a doozy because usually someone like Jean Grey takes my top spot when it comes to most powerful folks around lists. She's definitely one of the most powerful telepaths out there, and especially if we're talking X-Men members, Jean is also an original X-Men member too. So what's even more wild is that rather than become, a relic of the past who is bested by the younger, shinier mutant creations in comics, kind of like what's happened to Angel, I feel like, Jean has rather become a staple when it comes to the powerhouses of the X-Men, and she's returned to the X-Men multiple times as well. Jean initially joined the school and team back in X-Men issue number 1, all the way back at the beginning of X-Men history. Number 2. Hope Summers. I mean, what can I say about Hope that you don't already know? Hope Summers is definitely one of the most powerful mutants around in the comics. Don't think many people will dispute that. And the X-Men were fortunate for a time to actually have her on their roster, and just to have her around and as an ally, because she's super useful and super powerful. Hope's powers allow her to take at peak mastery the powers of any mutant that is within her vicinity. She is only limited really by range when it comes to this in terms of her ability to adopt one's powers, and she can adopt multiple powers at once as well. She doesn't drain the powers of her target and is instantly able to master any ability she takes on. It is pretty wild. She's also literally mutant Jesus, being the baby everyone fought over in X-Men Second Coming. Hope isn't a Summers by birth, but was the adopted daughter of the son of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, and adopted son of Jean Grey, Cable, aka Nathan Summers. Number 1. X-Man. Nate Grey just has to be one of the most powerful mutants out there, and likely the most powerful mutant to have ever existed in the comics. He is the perfect offspring, perfect genetically anyways, of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, hailing from the Age of Apocalypse reality where he was genetically engineered by his world Sinister. Nate would later grow up to be raised not by his genetic parents, but by AOA Forge, who is basically his adoptive father. Nate has fought on the side of his own reality's X-Men before, helping them out, but being capable of traveling to other dimensions and realities and manipulate time as well, Nate has also fought alongside the X-Men of Earth 616, even joining the team in 1999 in Astonishing X-Men issue number 1.
Number 10. X-Men 1602. You know I gotta talk about this Neil Gaiman and Marvel collaboration yet again. One of the central conflicts within Marvel's 1602 story is the subject of witch breed, in other words, mutants. This story takes the adversity that the regular X-Men face in modern times and amplifies it to about 10, having the mutants be the main victims of this timeline's Spanish Inquisition. Mutants are hunted down and treated in the most horrible medieval ways. Standing against this horrible treatment were a version of the X-Men led by Carlos Javier, or this Earth's King Charles I, who refers to them as Mutantur, or Changing Ones. The team was made up of Warner, aka the Angel, Henry Hal McCoy, brother Petros and sister Wanda, Scotius Summer Isle, Roberto Trefusis, and the wee apprentice John Gray. Now, this may be a basic team of X-Men, but all of these characters are very powerful in their own right, and in an Elizabethan world that can barely even comprehend them, with limited technology to even oppose them, they're even more powerful in retrospective.
Number 9. Giant Size Little, or Earth 71912. Formerly known editorially as the X-Babies, the X-Men of Earth 71912 are an alternate multiversal version of the X-Men as created by Scotty Young and Guri Hiru. Young's take on the Marvel Universe generally sees famous teams reinvented as little kids, like in his original take on Avengers vs. X-Men, where baby teams of Avengers and X-Men fight one another over a teddy bear named Bucky Bear. While they were once babies, this X-Men team has seemingly grown up a little bit at least, appearing as young children now. We also see this version of the X-Men and various mutant heroes and villains appearing in the Infinity comic written by Scotty Young, Giant Size Little Marvels, with art by Dax Gordine. While this team is technically just kids, that doesn't mean they aren't capable of making powerful moves. It just means that their world is governed by more kid-like and kid-friendly rules and confines. However, I have no doubt that the Giant Size Little X-Men could still kick butt in other universes as well, should they need to. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, please head on over to Facebook, where you can also show us some love by clicking that like and clicking that follow and all of the Facebook stuff.
Number 8. X-Men 2099. As the fourth incarnation of the X-Men in this universe, with basically no connection to classic characters or plot threads other than being inspired by the ideas of Charles Xavier, the nature of the 2099 X-Men team created by John Francis Moore and Ron Lim, first appearing in X-Men 2099 #1 in August of 1993, makes them one of the most creative and interesting versions of the team ever. The team comes together at the end of the 21st century, led by Desert Ghost, who has the ability to break down molecular structure with his left hand and heal even lost limbs with his right hand. He had a vision for a new future for mutant kind, and his team is made up of completely new characters like Cerebra, who has the abilities of Cerebro basically, and the ability to manipulate a person's nervous system, or Skullfire, who had ambient energy particle absorption. All the members of this X-Men team have unique powers to take on the grim corporate rule future of this timeline.
Number 7. Marauders. Marauders has to be one of my favorite X teams we've had in a long time. They weren't always so amazing and heroic though. The Marauders was initially a name taken by Mr. Sinister's band of mutants, who were pretty evil. The same mutants behind the Mutant Massacre, where many Morlocks were killed, and Angel, one of the original X-Men, got properly messed up. Poor Angel. Recently though, the Marauders' name was reclaimed by Kitty Pryde, now known as Captain Kate Pryde, the Hellfire Trading Company's Red Queen. Kate leads her Marauders team in an effort to fight mutant injustices the world over. Where there are mutants who are being kept from Krakoa or oppressed, her and the Marauders fight to free them. They also operate in trades, making deliveries the world over to ensure Krakoan-based goods and products like medicine and whiskey are delivered to Krakoa's trade partners.
Number 6. Asgardian X-Men. In What If number 12 from 1990, we get a little taste of what would happen if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard after their adventure during the Asgardian Wars in X-Men Annual number 9. Cyclops puts the X-Men to a vote, with the winning majority deciding whether to stay in or leave Asgard. Now Loki sent the losing majority home to Earth while allowing the winning majority to stay in Asgard. The result is an Asgardian X-Men squad that disperses among the Asgardian society, and it is so cool. Nightcrawler becomes a member of the New Warriors 3, or I guess 4. Sunspot becomes an Asgardian warrior, Danny Moonstar becomes a member of the Valkyrie, Ilyana Rasputin becomes the Enchantress, and above all of that and more, Storm becomes the goddess of thunder, with a version of Mjolnir becoming one of the most powerful versions of Thor in the comics ever. The X-Men becoming gods of Asgard with all the support of the already existing gods? Helheim, yes. Sorry, that's a bad joke, sorry.
Number 5. Age of Apocalypse. In the alternate reality of Earth 295, known as the Age of Apocalypse, the X-Men were one of the final superhero teams standing against the villainous tyrant known as Apocalypse. Of course, because it's his age. In this reality, many other superhero teams were wiped out and Magneto became the leader of the X-Men in Charles Xavier's stead after Professor X was killed when Legion traveled back in time and attempted to end Magneto. Charles put himself in the way of the kill shot, thereby dying and erasing Legion from existence, while also creating the Age of Apocalypse reality, where Apocalypse attacked Earth years earlier than in the main timeline. While Magneto's X-Men roster from this reality would change over time, the original roster consisted of Iceman, Storm, Colossus, Jean Grey, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch, of course. Really the only X-Men team the once mutant children of Magneto have ever been on. Later on, the team would be joined by AOA Wolverine, known as Weapon X, and Rogue, who would later also become Magneto's lover and eventually wife in this reality.
Number 4. Excalibur. Excalibur first appeared in Excalibur Special Edition number 1 by the legendary Chris Claremont and Alan Davis in December of 1987. They are a government-sponsored team of extraordinary mutants who fight for the people of jolly old England and their interests around the globe. The team is usually formed by British heroes and former members of the X-Men and was originally assembled with hopes to carry on Charles Xavier's dream and legacy, but their adventures usually deal with magical and interdimensional crises linked to the pocket dimension of Otherworld. The team right now is made up of Captain Britain Betsy Braddock and formerly Captain Britain Brian Braddock, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Phoenix, Magan, Captain Avalon, Gambit, Gloriana, Jubilee, Richter, and Shatterstar. But the team has included awesome heroes like Black Knight, Colossus, Dazzler, Juggernaut, Lockheed, Moira McTaggart, Rogue, and Sage, and was reformed under Apocalypse as a mutant diplomatic organization in Krakoa, the UK, and in Otherworld. One of the best X-Men adjacent team variations ever, in my humble opinion.
Number 3. X-Force. In principle, X-Force should be one of the most powerful teams out there because they usually aim to kill. But there are some other teams on here that are known for having simply more Omega level mutants on their most powerful rosters, which is why I hesitated to put X-Force too close to the top, although they're pretty up there still. X-Force initially, though, started as Cable's team, who himself is known for being on the verge of Omega level, possibly the techno-organic virus being one of the main things holding him back from that status. The X-Force was originally Cable's Black Ops team, used for taking out those he deemed threats to the timeline, but would later become more known as Wolverine's team, and at one point was also Sabretooth's team. Currently in the comics, X-Force is actually more thought of as Beast, aka Hank McCoy's team, although Wolverine is still a major player on it. There was a recent incarnation of the team that included Omega level telepath Jean Grey on its roster as well.
Number 2. Multiversal X-Men. Gonna be honest here, this one's a little wacky. As an example, at one point the Kurt Wagoner on the team used a collection of hundreds of disembodied Professor Xavier heads to search the multiverse for a habitable planet for the population of Earth 12245. And then he teleported them all to that new world. That alone puts the team high on the list, but the other members just bring the team comfortably to the number 2 spot. A Wolverine that was Governor General of Dominion of Canada, who was in a romantic heroic duo with the demigod Hercules, who gave Wolverine adamantine bones, and who was also on the team. Emmeline Frost Summers, who was granted the immortality of a goddess. Catherine Pride, who goes by Shadow and is as equally powered as her 616 self. A genius disembodied head of Xavier, that's by itself. Corporal Scott Summers, who fought in and ended the American Civil War in 2 weeks, having dispatched about 6,000 Confederate soldiers, and regular old Dazzler. They came together thanks to the villain Savior, but fought against 10 evil Xaviers, including a Witch King and Cthulhu Xavier, that were trying to destroy reality.
Number 1. The Five. The Five have to be one of the most powerful mutant teams to have ever existed at this point in the main continuity, or if not, they would still have to be pretty high up there, I think. The Five are an offshoot mutant team whose job it is to make sure that all mutants are brought back to life. They were brought together to bring back all mutants who had ever passed on previous to the present time and age of the X-Men. Their ranks include multiple Omega level mutants, and they have literally mastered control over one of the most powerful governing principles of the cosmos, that of life and death. I know, it's pretty crazy. Their ranks include Hope Summers, Elixir, Proteus, Egg, and Tempest.
Number 10. Armor. Armor, aka Hisako Ichiki, is actually a pretty powerful X-Men, even in the 616 universe, who can create a psionic exoskeleton suit of armor. This exoskeleton is incredibly strong, durable, impenetrable, and it's fueled by energy from Hisako's ancestors in the 616 universe. But not in the Ultimate universe, no sir. In this universe, Armor's exoskeleton takes the shape of giant animals and even dragons sometimes. Oh, and also in 1610, her exoskeleton is fueled by 10,000 mythological Japanese spirit demons. Like, how freaking awesome is that? Armor is cool and powerful enough that when the Ultimate Universe was destroyed, she was able to slip her way into the 616 Prime Universe, until she was kidnapped by Miss Sinister and eventually lost her life in X-Men Blue number 28 in 2018. Number 9. Firestar. Honestly, Firestar is one of those flame-wielding mutants that kind of flies over my head a lot of the time. Usually I think of Pyro, but in the Ultimate Universe, Pyro is actually not resistant to his own flames and therefore is covered in scar tissue and has like no nerve endings. But Firestar, in both 616 and the Ultimate Universe, is way cooler. Or I guess technically hotter, because fire. Ironically, her character actually had a huge phobia and hate of mutants, until her powers of microwave energy manipulation manifested, which seems to actually take the form of pyrokinesis in this universe. Her whole body can engulf in flames that she is thankfully resistant to. It allows her to fly and surprisingly burn things and people. Like when the super creepy Ultimate Wolverine tried to hit on her and she threatened to burn his nipples off. Number 8. It's Wolverine. I am gonna be honest, this version of Wolverine is a bit alarming in terms of his morals and preferences, and just his behavior in general is just a bit less heroic than his 616 counterpart. But despite that, it is hard not to admit that he is quite the powerful character. His healing factor is a bit different than his Prime version and is called a survival factor. That means he can survive being torn in half, departed from his head, and even blown up by a nuclear bomb. He can also detect lies and still has an adamantium skeleton. He was trained by Weapon X as an emotionless assassin, but when the Brotherhood hired him to take out Xavier, he proves he is more than just muscle, overcoming his brainwashing and joining the X-Men, although it may have also been because he fell in love with the teenage Jean Grey when he was like 30. Number 7. Psylocke. Colonel Betsy Braddock of Strike is England's most powerful telepath, capable of reading minds, creating psychic grenades that explode in the minds of others, and one of her coolest powers, brandishing a purple psychic energy blade. She was once possessed by the mutant David Xavier, but she was strong enough to overpower him momentarily, which, if you know anything about him and his level of power, is not something to scoff at. When Colossus dropped a car on her, her consciousness was powerful enough to jump into the body of a coma patient named Quanon, kind of calling back to how Betsy and Quanon share a connection in the main 616 universe. Number 6. Rogue. Similar to her Prime Universe version, Rogue, or Marion Carlisle, drains the life force and absorbs the memories and abilities of others through skin-to-skin contact, with the caveat being that she can end someone's life if she holds on too long. Now, in the Ultimate Universe, it turns out doing this on a mutant to the point of hitting the end of the line will actually permanently transfer those powers over to Rogue. This happened twice. The first time was with Gambit. She drained his life force when he was already near the end after a fight with the mutant Juggernaut, and she gained his kinetic energy manipulation abilities, plus sometimes his accent. The second time she did this, she drained the powers of Juggernaut himself when he was near death, gaining his abilities permanently, giving her the strength to throw cars, the durability to withstand demolishing buildings, super speed, and limitless stamina. She would use those abilities to help the X-Men. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde, as we know her, is known for her ability to phase herself and others through solid matter. She also has the ability on Earth 1610, but in this universe she discovered she can also minimize the negative space around her atoms, becoming super dense and granting herself extra dimensional mass, giving her enough strength to smash through concrete and metal and punch Spider-Man through the air, making her as hard as diamond and able to withstand attacks from the Phoenix. and making herself weigh 90 tons at peak mass. But that's as well as her phasing ability, which can allow her to walk on air and water. And that's before her exposure to Giant Man Serum to fight Galactus that leveled her up even more, allowing her to increase in size and gain a healing factor. Definitely one of my favorite Ultimate X-Men, and not just because of her romance with Peter Parker. Alright, number 4, Storm. The Omega level mutant known as Storm has a little bit of a different backstory compared to her main universe counterpart. On 1610, Aurora Monroe was an immigrant from Morocco who was found by Professor X living in Athens, Texas, where she'd been stealing cars for a living. When she took a 1978 Mustang for a joyride, the police finally caught up with her and Aurora used her powers to create a lightning storm to escape. Unlike her main universe counterpart though, she didn't have the training yet to control her powers to such a high degree and put some children in danger when she summoned the lightning storm, which eventually allowed the police to catch her. Xavier sent Jean Grey to convince the Athens authorities that Aurora was actually an FBI agent and that she was sent to relieve them of the mutant, and she went on to join the X-Men. She is much more sarcastic and rebellious and also had relationships with both Beast and Wolverine. She didn't just create storms, she created drama. Number 3. Iceman. In the 616 reality, Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, was one of the original X-Men and has achieved the classification of Omega level with his powers of cryokinesis and hydrokinesis. Now, in the Earth 1610 reality, he is actually one of the youngest members of the group, and it's almost as if he was kind of given a power boost. I know that doesn't make sense. How can you like boost an Omega level character? You can't. But he wields his powers in more interesting ways. He has always been able to transform his body, but he also creates gigantic ice trolls and ice walls. He's proven his worth by stopping a Weapon X invasion and the Ultimates all on his own. Professor Xavier himself has claimed that Iceman is one of the 3 most powerful X-Men, and he's probably not wrong. But I do gotta say, I don't know what they were thinking giving him the do-rag. I don't get it. Number 2, Professor X. In the Ultimate Universe, much like in the main one, Charles Xavier was the most powerful telepath on Earth, possessing vast psionic abilities and was known as one of the most powerful mutants ever. His mutant abilities give him telepathy, astral projection, and this version experiences some telekinetic skills as well, unlike his 616 version. He is also a genius with skills in surgery, therapy, and biochemistry. The only thing that I would say is both kind of a power boost and a bit of a caveat is the fact that while he's a good guy, he is also somewhat corrupt, or like very corrupt, as well as very manipulative. He willingly reads and messes with the minds of others, like Bobby Drake, who had a girlfriend when he first joined the X-Men who almost convinced him to leave the team, so Xavier erased her from Bobby's memory. It's kinda really messed up. He even created the mutant drug Banshee. Like, sure, he knows what he's doing is wrong, but that doesn't really make it okay, you know what I mean? And number 1, it's Jean Grey. Did you think it was going to be anyone else? As an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic, she is already a pretty tough character to take on. But as almost all of us know, Jean Grey is the host for the Phoenix Force, and that still remains the case here on Earth 1610. Only, she seems to use even more of that power. Unleashing a small fraction of her power melted the armor of Apocalypse, but her full might against him tore him apart atom by atom, causing him so much pain Apocalypse begged her to stop. Apocalypse begged her to stop. As the Phoenix, she reversed time, read people's minds, saved the whole team multiple times, and took off into space, literally traveling to what was essentially heaven. There is a reason people fear Jean Grey, and the Phoenix Force gives them all the more reason to poop their pants.
Number 10. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom are the children of Storm and Dr. Doom. They come from the novel series X-Men The Chaos Engine, which is actually a trilogy, wherein we explore what would happen if 3 great villains took control of the Marvel Universe, creating their own version of a perfect world using the Cosmic Cube. It starts off with Doom's variation on this world. In this reality, Dr. Doom is has made Storm his wife, and she rules by his side as his empress. The union of these powerful characters produces two children, Kristoff and Kadira. We can assume, of course, being the children of both Doom and Storm, that they would be physically, mentally, and demonstrably powerful when it came to their abilities, especially being raised by these two powerhouses. Also, if I wasn't clear about this is an alternate reality, so if you're like, when did this happen? It is not main continuity. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more children of the X-Men, they have a lot of kids if we, surf through the multiverse, so we could do it for you. If you want that part 3, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Nocturne. Nocturne is the daughter of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Obviously, not from the main continuity. In fact, Talia Wagner is known for being a part of a multiversal hero team, the Exiles. Nocturne is from the alternate reality of Earth 2182. In fact, back on her home reality, which first appeared in Millennial Visions, Talia is also known as a member of the X-Men team, fighting alongside her father, Nightcrawler, who is actually their field leader. She is a low-level telepath with incredible superhuman agility skills, the ability to wall crawl, and the ability to fire powerful brimstone hex energy bolts, something inherited from both her father and her mother. Nocturne's physical appearance is also similar to her father's, a bit demonic looking, and of course, blue. All my blue X-Men. Top 10 blue X-Men. Actually, I feel like there's a lot of X-Men that are blue. Or mutants that are blue, maybe? There's a lot of blue mutants, for sure. I don't know about X-Men team members. Number 8. Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine from the alternate reality of Earth 1610. His powers are similar to his father's, but in this reality they're believed to work a little bit differently. As opposed to just being insane healing powers, Jimmy's power set in this universe as a mutant is believed to be based more in survival. So these powers aren't necessarily just about healing, but survival instincts and capability, meaning that Jimmy is just much better at surviving and evolving to survive than anyone else alive on the planet. And I mean that because in this reality, Wolverine eventually dies, so really Jimmy is the only one left alive who's really good at surviving. Jimmy Hudson has also been bonded to a poison before and gained control of his poison, which are basically alien-like beings resembling symbiotes in look and abilities, but ultimately a different alien race themselves, called poisons. So yeah. Jimmy is the son of Wolverine and Magneto's wife, Magda Lencher, although Wolverine urges him through a letter when the truth of his connection to Jimmy is revealed that he actually shouldn't focus too much on, who his biological parents are. Jimmy was raised by adoptive parents. His dad actually served with Logan in the war and agreed to look after Jimmy in his father's place, even giving the young boy his own family name. Hudson. Number 7. Esme. Esme is one of the main Stepford Cuckoos. Well, I mean, I guess they're all pretty main, but you know what I mean. She's probably one of the most well-known if we're talking offhand about how many of the Cuckoos you can name. Esme and the other Cuckoos are basically like the children of Emma Frost, although as I've said before, not children that she had consensually. And I didn't say that before in this list, but if you've heard me talk about the Stepford Cuckoos and their relation to Emma, yeah. Instead, these were lab babies basically made from Emma's eggs that were stolen from Emma while she was in a comatose state. Esme, like the other Cuckoos, is kind of like a genetic clone as well as a child of Emma's, and Emma actually does consider the Cuckoos to be like her daughters. She treats them as though they were her own flesh and blood, and often her own responsibility, kinda stepping in to like play mom sometimes, although she does give them freedom to make their own mistakes. I guess what I mean is Emma isn't known for being like a controlling kind of parent. She's like, I'm here when you need me, otherwise you do you. More recently in the comics, Esme, known for her diamond form and powerful telepathic abilities, teamed up and primarily dated young Cable. Well, technically all the Cuckoos were dating him at one point, though I would say Esme was basically the main squeeze of young Cable, and the sister that he was most taken by while he was dating all of them. And if you're like, whoa, how did that happen? The Stepford Cuckoos, they share things because they're kind of like a hive mind. So they're like, we'll just all date this person. It's cool. Also Krakoa. Everyone's dating everyone. Number 6. Polaris. Polaris is the daughter of Magneto, and while you might not think of Magneto as being an X-Men, considering, he started out as an X-Men villain, he has also worked with the team before and even served as a member himself. Heck, at one point he was in charge of the whole New Mutants crew, let's not forget that. Magneto may have some questionable methods when it comes to getting justice that put him on the spectrum of villain, but I think at the end of the day he's just trying to do what's best for mutants, or at least what he thinks is best for mutant kind. Polaris, like her father, also has magnetic based powers, which, like her father, are also pretty impressive. Polaris is considered an alpha level mutant and recently got to join the X-Men team herself after being elected to join them in the Krakoan X-Men elections. Psychic elections. Imagine if we could all just vote psychically. That would be awesome. That would be so much easier. You would just like sit down and you'd be like, who do I want to vote for? Done. Number 5. Xandra Naramani. Xandra is Professor X's daughter, who is created out of his genetic material and that of his lover's genetic material, the Shi'ar Magistrix Lilandra Naramani, after both of them were believed dead. As such, Xandra grew up to become Shi'ar royalty and also spent a good amount of her life hunted because of this, with various parties attempting to use her for their own means. Xandra is an extremely gifted telepath. She can manipulate others' minds, read minds, and can create hyper-realistic telepathic illusions. Number 4. Ruby Summers. She was the X-offspring used in our oh-so-clickable thumb for the part 1 to this list, and although she was on my extended list for that part 1, my like long brainstorm that I came up with, I didn't get around to talking about her because I kind of reached a point where there were too many Summers children on that list, and I was like, I don't want to make this a top 10 children of Cyclops. We got that list, and also that's not what this list is. What can I say? Psyche's got strong genes. That's why Mr. Sinister is so obsessed after all and is known as the #1 fan of the Summers Club. Scott Summers is Ruby's dad in the alternate reality she hails from, and Emma Frost is her mother. This makes Ruby fairly powerful, not at the level of Hope or X-Man, but still pretty impressive. She's also super cool looking, which is an added bonus. Ruby hails from the alternate Earth of 1191, the home reality of famous X-Men ally Bishop. Ruby is also capable of emitting optic blasts like her dad and his brothers, but she has more control over when and how she emits these blasts, unlike her dad who's like, I literally need a visor. Ruby also comes with her Ruby form, which like her mother's Diamond form, grants her invulnerability and pretty much immortality. Number 3. Olivier Raven. Olivier Raven is legally known as Olivier Lebeau and is one of the alternate reality children of Gambit and Rogue. Honestly, I feel like there are not enough of these kids out in the multiverse. I don't know if that's just me. For a couple as famous as Gambit and Rogue, I mean, you would think that we'd have a lot more kids from them, at least through the multiverse. Though admittedly, I'm not quite sure that Rogue and Gambit are really the kid having type, at least from what I've seen in the main continuity. They seem pretty content with just having their fur babies right now. So maybe they just aren't super into having kids as a family. Olivier hails from the reality of Earth 41001, the reality of Gen Next, a group Ollie is part of. He has powers similar to his mother's, except he has better control over them and is able to choose when and how much power, life energy, and memories he absorbs via physical contact, or doesn't absorb in cases where he just, wants to make physical contact without using his powers. He can also absorb powers on a more permanent level, although he has less control it seems over when this happens. Like his father, he also seems to have some charm-based powers. Either that, or he's just charming. Number 2. Proteus. Proteus is the son of Moira McTaggart, who before I would count more as like an ex-ally, but with recent revelations, we can definitely consider her a member in the same way we might consider someone like Charles Xavier. It turns out that Moira herself was a mutant this whole time, possessing unique reincarnation powers. She has also been known for being a leader and teacher of X-Men groups before, including the time when she led a team that Professor X then recruited, sending them into Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. Not Krakoa as we know it now, but Krakoa as it was back in the day when it was like a monster island. Proteus is Kevin McTaggart, son of Joseph and Moira McTaggart. He is currently one of the 5 on Krakoa, and his powers as part of that team are mainly used to warp reality, allowing the non-viable eggs that Egg, formerly known as Gold Balls, produces to become viable for life. These eggs are then used to grow new versions of fallen mutants. Proteus is an Omega level mutant who requires hosts to survive. Initially, Kevin had a body, but now he's basically just pure energy. The hosts he controls and feeds off of eventually are exhausted and killed by that energy drain, making him not just a powerful psionic mutant, but also a powerful energy vampire as well, unintentionally. Number 1. Legion. Legion is the son of Professor Charles Xavier that was conceived when he had a love affair with Gabrielle Haller, which is where Legion gets his legal last name, as his given name is David Haller. Legion is so powerful because he suffers from a severe dissociative identity disorder, where he has more than 100 100 personas residing within him. Each persona has a number, many have names, and they each have their own specific power set that show up whenever they take over. Because of this, there is almost nothing that Legion isn't capable of. He can manipulate matter and time. We've seen him time travel and completely warp reality as a result of his possible abilities. He also has some pretty powerful hair, which I gotta say, I'm happy that he still rocks even now in the current modern day comics. He's still got that sweet hair. So tall. Number 10. Crusader. Crusader is the daughter of X-Men team member Rogue and Avenger Captain America. I know, a weird combination. But in the reality of Earth 9811, these two ended up together after the heroes and villains on Battleworld decided to call a truce. Remaining there, they settled down and raised families, putting their differences aside. I'm not sure how their relationship worked, with Rogue not really being able to touch people and all at this point, or how she had a child considering that, but perhaps, like on Earth 616, she eventually was able to work through the trauma causing this side effect of her powers. Or perhaps the Captain America of Earth 9811 was immune to her involuntary energy and power draining effects. Either way, Sarah is their daughter. She gets much of her power from her mother, or rather she gets much of her power from the power her mother had absorbed in her day, meaning that Sarah is super strong, durable, and can fly. She is also considered worthy enough to lift Thor's hammer and wields her father's shield. Number 9. Wolverine. I really wanted to put Laura Kinney higher up on this list because, well, I love her so much, but unfortunately the psionics are just always pushing some of my favorite and most powerful characters further down on these lists. Those psionics. Oh well. Laura Kinney as X-23 and now Wolverine is still one of the most powerful children of the X-Men around. Some argue that she is more clone, while others argue that she is more biological offspring of Logan, but in reality, she's kind of a bit of both. She was created as a female clone of Wolverine after his genetic material was combined with that of her creator, scientist Sarah Kinney. Sarah noticed that there were damage spots basically in the samples of Logan's genetic material that they had, which was why their cloning process had been unsuccessful up to this point. And so she used her own genetic material to patch those rough spots, which made Laura a female clone. Sarah was forced to carry Laura to term as a surrogate by her jealous colleague Xander Rice, as punishment for even creating the female clone to begin with, a strategy that admittedly had not been approved. Laura has powers similar to her father. She has a regenerative healing factor and was also trained from birth to be a skilled fighter, bodyguard, and assassin. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about more children of the X-Men, there are a lot out there in the multiverse. Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Chimera. Chimera is the daughter of Storm and likely Black Panther, who hails from the alternate reality of 13729. Yeah, sadly Storm and T'Challa have never had a child together in the main continuity. I know, it's a bit of a bummer. Unless they had like a real secret child that we just don't know about yet, but I doubt it. Chimera seems to have inherited the powers of her mother, but also shares a connection to the Earth, which allows her to draw on and harness its energy. She is also a skilled tracker and can communicate telepathically with animals. I'd also assume, as she's the daughter of Storm, that she's a skilled combatant as well. As while Storm is more well known for her goddess status and weather manipulation powers, she is also an extremely skilled fighter. And if she's Black Panther's daughter, then she should definitely be a skilled fighter. I mean, you got two amazing parents that are both amazing fighters, so just saying. Number 7. Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the son of Charles Xavier and Mystique, if you can believe that. I know, it's pretty shocking. Charles Xavier II was technically born into the reality of Earth 616, where we later find out that while Mystique actually took the form of Moira when giving birth, Charles actually knew that he was in a relationship with Raven, so it wasn't like a trick of hers. They were actually just wanted to be together, I guess. This version of Charles, however, is an all grown up one from the alternate future of Earth 13729. When his powers first manifested, he accidentally killed his adoptive mother and ended up later joining forces with his half-brother Raze, another child of Mystique's sired by Wolverine, another child of the X-Men. Charles Xavier II has a brilliant and conniving mind and, like his father, is an immensely gifted telepath, capable of using his powers to bend others to his will. Number 6. Akihiro. Akihiro is the son of Wolverine and his wife Itsu. Unfortunately, before Akihiro was even born, his life took a turn for the worse. Along with inheriting his father's powers, I think he also inherited some of his tragic luck. Wolverine has the worst luck, I think. His mother Itsu was killed before she could give birth to him, assassinated. The child was believed dead, but in reality he had been cut from her womb and possibly, due to his inherited healing powers, miraculously survived. Although, That's not clear, because usually your powers don't manifest until puberty, but sometimes your powers manifest when you're in the womb. I mean, look at Professor X with Cassandra Nova. Apparently that's a thing that happened. Akihiro would grow up and become a pawn of the villain known as Romulus. For most of his life, he'd also be known as Daken, a cruel nickname given to him when he was a child, being raised by his adoptive parents. The nickname was given to him because of his mixed race appearance, being part American and part Japanese. Though to be clear, his parents weren't the ones that gave it to him. It was people around his parents. Akihiro's powers are similar to Wolverine's, though his bone claws are a little bit different in terms of placement and appearance. Like his father, Akihiro is also known for being a skilled fighter as well. The apple does not fall far from the tree when it comes to fighting abilities. Number 5. Cable. Cable is the son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, non-X member Madeline Pryor, who later becomes the villain known as the Goblin Queen, and another X-Man's, Jean Grey, who kind of becomes like an adoptive mother, but who also possesses Madeline's memories of raising baby Christopher. Because comics. Cable is Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, often referred to as just Nathan Summers or really just Cable, although back in the day we did know him as Baby Christopher. Cable as a baby was kidnapped by Apocalypse and infected with the techno-organic virus. This is the only thing that makes him weak-ish, but really he is still amazingly strong, as he can even fend off that virus, containing it to one side of his body using his psionic powers. That in and of itself is pretty impressive, as the techno-organic virus is generally known for being, well, unstoppable. Even with his psionic powers mainly preoccupied, Cable is still a hard one to beat, as he has so many combatant-based skills that he brings to the table, and he is also an experienced time traveler besides. Number 4. Rachel Summers. Yes, get ready, because many of the most powerful X-Kids out there just happen to be Summers related, so yeah, get ready for that. Honestly, I've always wanted to do a video just to explain the complicated nature that is the Summers and Grey family tree, which honestly is a lot, and it's very timey-wimey. Rachel herself is one of those very complex kids of theirs. She is the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from the alternate Earth of 811. In that reality, she was made into a hound, a weapon used to hunt down mutants, even being one herself. Rachel is an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic who also has the ability to chronoskim and manipulate time, even traveling through it. Rachel is also known for being an avatar of the Phoenix, at one time actually considered the true avatar for it, but then later having the power sort of dialed down to a mere echo of it. So she was no longer the true avatar, they were just like, you just have a thing, and it's not even like the real Phoenix Force, but it's like a version of it. Still, the seeming piece or echo of the Phoenix Force that resides within her has been known to flare up from time to time, or her connection to the Phoenix Force, however we want to see that, occasionally boosting Rachel to an off-the-charts level of power. But like I said, that doesn't happen all the time. Number 3. Hope Summers. Hope is the adopted daughter of Cable, who was originally known as the Mutant Messiah Baby. Cable saved Hope from Bishop, who basically wanted to destroy her. In Bishop's reality, the Mutant Messiah would end up causing the event that led to the oppression and persecution of mutants. However, in Cable's reality, the Mutant Messiah would grow up to become a savior, so you can see why these two were opposed on this topic. For the X-Men of Earth 616, the Mutant Messiah was the first new mutant to have been born since basically M-Day, and so she brought hope to the mutants of the 616 reality. Cable body-slided with Hope to another time to raise her in safety. He would end up naming Hope after her adoptive mother, his love who died, Hope, and she got the Summers name from Cable himself. But although she looks a lot like Jean, she actually has no biological relation to the Summers or the Grey families, at least not that we know of. Hope's mutant abilities allow her to copy the powers of anyone within a certain range. Hope also gains access to these powers without struggling at all to use them, receiving them basically at their peak level and with the auto knowledge basically of how to use them. So if you're like, oh, she's gotta like figure it out, no, she's just like instant god mode with those powers basically. Number 2. Scarlet Witch. Wanda is known for being one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe. She has used her powers to completely warp reality the world over, and her chaos magic has pulled off other immensely world-changing feats, such as flipping the alignment of all major heroes and villains in the comics during the events of Axis. Initially, her chaos magic powers were believed to be somewhat mutant in origin. In fact, they were kind of presented initially as like Jinx-like mystical mutant abilities during her first appearances. However, we've since learned that both Wanda and her superpower superpowered brother Pietro, aka Quicksilver, were never really mutants at all, nor were they related to Magneto. However, they still spent a good amount of their life around Magneto, who secretly believed them to be his children, and then another good amount of time thinking that he was their actual father, until it was revealed that this was all due to manipulation by the High Evolutionary. High Evolutionary just coming in and messing pretty much everybody up when it comes to their backstories and origins. Wanda herself has never really gotten along with the X-Men, especially since the events of M-Day, but she is still considered, I think, a part of Magneto's family, and a powerful one at that, regardless of her status as a mutant or a non-mutant. I know there are some people out there that want to be like, it never happened, but like, they still spent a lot of time together thinking that they were family, so I think we can still count it, friends. Also, make Wanda a mutant again. Do it. Make it happen. Give me Wanda and Quicksilver back. Number 1. X-Man. X-Man is Nathaniel Gray, the lab-born child made by combining the genetic materials of both Jean Grey and Cyclops. So basically like Cable, but if he had been made perfectly by villain Mr. Sinister. He actually hails from the alternate reality of AOA, Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295. Here, Sinister created him to use as his own weapon, but of course, Nate being so powerful, managed to escape Sinister and instead ended up being raised by Forge of Earth 295. He is considered one of the most powerful mutants of all time, which would also make him one of the most powerful children of the X-Men out there. Nate can warp reality, resurrect the dead, resurrect himself, travel to alternate Earths and dimensions, and even manipulate the time stream. He's basically the most OP of characters when it comes to the Marvel Universe. And if you've seen artwork of him, you will probably recognize him as someone who looks like Mutant Jesus, which, yes, he is god level, so that is the point. Who are your favorite children of the X-Men? Who do you think is the most powerful? Who do you think deserves a spot on our potential part 2? After all, there's a lot of people we didn't talk about here. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I am your host Amanda McKnight. Till next time, stay nerdy, YouTube.